Hey friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is Alison Prestwood. She's a 4-time ACM Bass Player of the Year nominee, and she's going to talk about her friendship with the great Carol Kaye.
Carol Kaye was the premier bass player in the Los Angeles music scene, recording scene in the 60s. She was playing on everything she played. The Beat Goes On was her little riff. Ding, 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 ding. And you try to think of that song without that riff, and you really can't do it. So she was that important. She played on Beach Boys things. She played guitar on a Sinatra song, something. She played guitar on "You've Got That Lovin' Feeling." She was the go-to gal out there, and and I say gal like she was the go-to player. And I think in the 70s she did more movie and TV work. She was working, morning, afternoon, night. She had kids. She was working all the time. And she got to a point where she had to dial that back. So she chose to do TV and movie work instead of playing on everybody's songs. Of course, she played on Motown too, the ones that were sent to LA to play on. When I was 16, I had been playing bass for 3 years. And because I can read music, thanks to my mother, I bought Carol's books. Of course, they were, way over my head at the time, but I was fascinated by it. So I've been a fan of hers for a long time. And then when I met her in 2000, I was, of course, agog. But she, let me play with her, and we must have exchanged emails at that time. She's very, she loves to communicate. She's big on Facebook. She's a storyteller. And I think it might have been 2003, maybe 2004. I was going to be in LA for some gig. I don't remember what now. And I had the wild idea to see if I could take a lesson from her while I was out there. She lived a bit north of LA at the time, I think about an hour north. But she said, "Sure, you want to stay at my house?" Yeah. So I went there. I got there on a Saturday morning because I guess after my gig was probably Friday night. I got to her house Saturday morning, and I wanted to learn her pick technique. That was my main thing. We spent most of that day working on that. She sat there and played Bernadette for me with a pick. Whether it's Jamerson or Carol Kaye is the big question that people have about the song Bernadette. And she had it written out, and I was watching the transcription, and she was playing it. I thought, well, and I got to say, there is about a 2-bar phrase about midway in that song where it does not sound like something Jamerson would play to me. And I know that a lot of those things were written out, but they also had some license to add to things. There's a little flourish that she does that sounds to me like dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee kind of thing. That's not Jamerson. His stuff was a little bit different than that. That's why I believe her. I believe her also because she's my friend. But I believe her subjectively, and I believe her objectively because of that. And I have told people, hey, listen to that part and let me know what you think about that. I think it's her. And they played on so many things, it's I can see how history wouldn't know it for sure, but I believe it. So that Saturday, she taught me pick technique, which I have used ever since. I use one of her picks. Wish I had one on me. Normally there's one in my back pocket. I didn't do it today. It's a little teardrop-shaped white pick with Carol Kaye written on it. I still use that.
How thick is it?
Very. In fact, I'm getting one. Yeah, it's a very hard pick. Very much so.
That's very heavy.
Yeah.
That's like heavier than a Fender Extra Heavy.
It is. You should keep it. I've got several. I buy them by the peck or gross or whatever.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's about, the placement's about like that. She mutes on top of the strings. She puts felt on top of the strings with like actual tape just on the bass and going across. I actually mute underneath when I mute, with some kind of foam usually, because I don't want to put tape on some of my nice basses, which they're all nice in some way. But yeah, she does that economy of motion, and she can go over, like, skip strings, play octaves so fast and so clean, you wouldn't believe it. This is incredible to watch her play. And she's a great guitar player, too. On that Saturday, we did pick technique, and then we went to dinner, and she told me some incredible stories. She was not one to... she held her own in a world, certainly, of men in the 60s in the studio world. And, nobody thought about it back then. She was just great, so she was welcomed into the scene, but she wouldn't put up with any kind of nonsense. And she told me some great stories that I probably can't tell here. And so then, yes, she had a pull-out couch in her living room. She had some bird cages, and she had cats. And I went to bed that night and woke up that Sunday morning like, I'm in Carol Kaye's house. This is crazy, the animals and everything. So then that Sunday, we worked on jazz. She's a tremendous jazz player. And even though I don't really do that in my working world, I came up in college studying that and being a huge Jaco Pastorius fan. And so I was certainly happy to have her teach me. I couldn't keep up with her on that stuff. But I already had the full day of pick technique instruction in my back pocket, and I was along with the pick itself. And so it was great. It was absolutely great. One of the best things I've ever done. Sometimes you just got to ask people things. And I wish I'd done that with other heroes early in my life. That I did it with her, and I'm so glad. And we still communicate. I talked to her the other day on her birthday via email. At that point, my session career was kicking pretty good, and I had enough opportunity to play however I wanted to play on things. And that was one thing I started doing, was using a pick where probably more than most people, not as much as I used my fingers, but I used it plenty. And it was a cool sound, and it does cut through a little bit better in the track sometimes. And I think you can get away with more McCartney-ish kind of things with a pick. Some of the Beach Boys-y pet sounds kind of bass playing. You can incorporate some of that. So yes, I started doing it. I still do it. She was recording direct for the most part. I have heard her talk about having a fuzz pedal that she used. She played on... She had some records of her own out, instrumental things. And so she would use some of those things. And things were moving fast on those sessions. And they had written out music. Here in Nashville, we do number charts. They had a lot of things written out that she wouldn't necessarily have to follow if she came up with something better, which was probably very often. But they were just knocking it out, They played together so much that I'm sure it was not hard for them. And I think because most of them were jazzers and deeply steeped in it and a lot of experience playing live jazz, I think a lot of the music they played was pretty easy for them to just knock out without any thought whatsoever for the most part. I hear, sometimes I'm watching TV and it's old 70s shows. I can totally tell it's Carol. Her pick style is one way that you can find out. You can hear her playing. She also got heavily involved in instructional books. She has a lot of those, both for guitar and for bass. And I've got quite a few of those. So any bass player has to know her name. And even people who aren't bass players know her name. I have friends, I'm from Montgomery originally. I have some friends, especially one, when he hears something about Carol Kaye or sees it, he always sends me the link, and he's not a musician at all. He just thinks she's cool, and she is. Sadly, she never was one to keep her old basses, so we don't. One of those P basses, one of those P basses should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but nobody knows which ones they are. They're just out there in the world somewhere. She's not really a gearhead at all. At all. And it's in the fingers anyway, right? As they say.
I love the idea that somebody's playing a moose lodge out there with Carol.
Oh, somebody doesn't even know. One time she also told me that their life was moving so fast. If she like broke a string or something was wrong with the bass, she'd just get another one and keep going. You know, not bother with fixing it or whatever. Just get it and go.
Was she into flat wounds?
Yes. Tomastic flat wounds. I don't think she was a big string changer. And you don't have to anyway with flat wounds. That's what I love about them. I always have, when I go to a session, maybe there's a time when I don't have a bass with flat wounds, but almost every single time in the arsenal I take, there is one with flat wounds. Yeah, and really with a pick, it's the best thing, especially if I'm using her technique. It all fits together that way.